Before the stones were moved, before the first wall was laid, there was a world in motion. The Andes Mountains rise like a spine across western South America. They are young, restless, shaped by fire and force. Rivers cut deep valleys, frost cracks stone, earthquakes shake the ground. Life here is hard, but people came. They came long before Machu Picchu, thousands of years before. By 3000 BCE, people lived along the coast of what is now Peru. They fished, they farmed, they built simple villages. Over time, they learned to grow maize, potatoes, and quinoa. They raised llamas and alpacas. They wove cloth, they shaped clay. Slowly, villages grew into towns. Towns became centers of trade and power. One of the first great cultures was Chavín. Around 1200 BCE, they built a temple at Chavín de Huántar. It had stone carvings and underground passages. It showed that Andean people could organize labor and work with stone. But they did not build cities in the clouds. Later, around 200 CE, the Moche rose along the northern coast. They built pyramids of adobe. They painted scenes of warriors and gods. They worked gold and copper. But their world was far from the high mountains. Then came the Wari. Between 600 and 1000 CE, they built a vast network of roads and administrative centers across the highlands. Their cities had planned layouts. Their influence reached far. They may have inspired later builders, but their time passed. Their cities fell silent. In the valleys near Cusco, small groups lived and farmed. They spoke Quechua. They honored the sun, the earth, and the mountains. They believed that certain peaks, Apu, were sacred. They made offerings to them. They lived close to the land. Then, in the 13th century, a new power began to rise. A small group from the Cusco Valley claimed descent from the sun. They called themselves the Inka. At first, they were just one of many small kingdoms, but they grew strong. They expanded. They conquered. They built. And by the 1400s, they ruled an empire that stretched from modern-day Colombia to Chile. This was the world into which Machu Picchu was born. The Inca did not start as rulers of an empire. They began as a small tribe near Cusco. Their first ruler, Manco Cápac, is part legend, part history. Stories say he emerged from a cave or lake, sent by the sun god Inti to found a great city. He and his sister wife, Mama Oclo, traveled until they reached the Cusco Valley. There, they planted a golden staff into the ground. It sank deep. This was the sign. This was where they would build. Cusco became the center of the Inca world. Its name means navel, the center of the universe. The city was laid out in the shape of a puma, a sacred animal. Temples rose, palaces were built, roads spread outward like threads. But the empire did not grow fast at first. It took centuries. The real expansion began in the 1400s. The ninth ruler, Pachacuti Inka Yupanqui, changed everything. Pachacuti came to power around 1438. At that time, the Inca were under attack by a rival group called the Chanca. The old ruler fled. Pachacuti stayed. He organized the defense. He led the army. He won. That victory made him ruler. Pachacuti was not just a warrior. He was a builder, a thinker, a reformer. He reorganized the empire. He created a system of government. He ordered the construction of temples, storehouses, and roads. He demanded labor from conquered peoples. This system was called mita, a duty to work for the state. Under Pachacuti, the Inca began to build on a grand scale. Sacsayhuaman, a fortress above Cusco, was started. Its stones weigh up to 120 tons. They were shaped and fit together without mortar. The walls zigzag like lightning. How they were built remains a mystery. Pachacuti also built religious sites. He honored Inti, the sun god. He built the Coricancha, the temple of the sun in Cusco. It was covered in gold. But Pachacuti did more than build. He reshaped belief. He said the Inca were chosen by the sun. He promoted this idea across the empire. He moved people from one region to another to weaken old loyalties. He imposed Quechua as the official language. He was a man of vision, and it was during his reign that Machu Picchu was most likely begun. Machu Picchu sits on a ridge between two peaks, Machu Picchu and Huayna Picchu. It is 2,430 meters above sea level. The Urubamba River flows in a deep canyon below. The site is surrounded by steep slopes and thick forest.
It was not easy to reach. There are no roads from the lowlands. The only way is by foot, along narrow trails. Even today, visitors must walk for hours to arrive. So why build here? For many years, people thought Machu Picchu was a fortress. Its walls are strong, its location is defensible, but there is little evidence of war. No weapons, no battle scars, no large garrison. Others said it was a religious center. The layout includes temples, altars, and sacred rocks. The Inti stone may have been used to mark the solstices. The Temple of the Sun has curved walls and precise windows. It faces the rising sun. But it was not just a temple. There are homes, storehouses, farms. It was lived in. In the 1940s, a historian named Albert Rowe studied the site. He found that Machu Picchu had two main parts, the agricultural sector and the urban sector. The lower part has terraces for farming. The upper part has buildings for living and ceremony. Later, in the 1970s, another scholar, John Rowe, no relation, proposed that Machu Picchu was a royal estate, a place for the Inca ruler to retreat, a country palace. This idea gained support. Documents from the Spanish colonial period mention a site called Picchu. They say it belonged to Pachacuti. In 2008, a team of archaeologists led by Richard Berger and Lucy Salazar found more evidence. They studied the style of the buildings. They compared them to other sites built by Pachacuti. The architecture matched. They also analyzed bones found at the site. Many of the people buried there were women. Some came from distant parts of the empire. This suggests they were servants or attendants, not local farmers. The conclusion? Machu Picchu was built as a royal estate for Pachacuti. After he retired from ruling, he may have lived there, or it was built in his honor. Either way, it was a place of power, rest, and ritual. But if it was a royal estate, why so remote? Why so hard to reach? The answer may lie in the landscape. The Inca saw the world as alive. Mountains were gods. Rivers were sacred. Rocks had spirit. The site of Machu Picchu is surrounded by Apu, sacred peaks. The river below is a powerful force. The sunrise over the eastern peak is dramatic. To build here was to claim the sacred, to live among the gods. Now we come to the heart of the matter, the stones. They rise from the mountain like bones from the earth, solid, silent, and immense. Some weigh more than 10 tons. That is heavier than 2 elephants, heavier than a full-grown bull and 5 cows together. To lift such a mass today, we would use steel cables, diesel engines, and cranes that stretch into the sky. But the Inca had none of these. No engines, no metal chains, no machines at all. And yet, they moved them. They lifted them. They set them in place with care so fine that a blade of grass cannot slip between them. This is not a small thing. This is not guesswork. This is real stone, real weight, real effort. And it happened not once, but hundreds of times, thousands. The question is not if they move the stones. The question is how. The stones did not grow where they stand. They came from elsewhere. The largest ones came from a quarry on the ridge just above Machu Picchu. It is only a few hundred meters away. But that distance is uphill, steep, rocky, narrow. The path is not flat. It drops into ravines. It climbs over broken ground. To carry a 10-ton block across such terrain is a task beyond simple strength. It demands planning. It demands patience. It demands a way. Smaller stones came from the riverbed of the Urubamba, far below, or from outcrops on nearby slopes. These were easier to reach, but still they had to be carried up. Nothing was lowered from above. Everything had to climb. And the Inca had no help from the tools we rely on. No iron chisels to cut stone. No wheels to roll it forward. No horses or oxen to pull it. They had no pulleys to multiply force. No cranes to lift. No gunpowder to blast rock apart. They had only what the land gave them: stone, wood, rope, water, and human hands. So, how did they do it? This is the challenge, and it is not a mystery wrapped in myth. It is a puzzle built on physics, on labor, on knowledge passed from hand to hand. Let us follow the stone. First, it must be freed from the mountain. The Inca did not dig deep mines. They worked the surface. They found a good block of granite in the bedrock and began to shape it while it was still attached. They did not saw. They did not drill with metal. Instead, they used a method older than memory: fire and water. They built fires along the edge of the stone. The flames burned for hours. The rock heated. It expanded. Then, at the right moment, they poured cold water, perhaps from a bucket, perhaps from a cloth, onto the hot surface. The outside of the stone cooled fast. The inside stayed hot. This created stress. Cracks formed. The rock split. This method is called thermal shock. It is simple. It is effective. It leaves no marks of metal. It uses only what is at hand. Once the block began to separate, workers used harder stones to break it free. They chose dolerite, a dark, heavy rock that is harder than granite. With dolerite hammerstones, they pounded the edges. They chipped. They shaped. They worked slowly, carefully. A single block might take days to free. Then came the shaping. The Inca did not build with rough stone. They built with precision. Each block had to fit exactly against its neighbors. No mortar, no gaps. The walls had to stand for centuries. They had to survive earthquakes. The fit had to be perfect.
To shape the stone, workers used the same hammerstones. They stood around the block and chipped away small pieces. They did not rush. They tested the fit again and again. One method was to place a finished stone next to the rough one. They rubbed the two together with sand in between. The sand acted like sandpaper. It wore down the high spots. This is called abrasive grinding. It left a smooth, exact surface. Another method was trial fitting. They placed the new stone into its position. They looked for gaps. They marked the high points. Then they took it out and chipped those spots. They repeated this over and over, like solving a puzzle with a hammer. This was not factory work. It was craft. It required eyes trained to see a fraction of a millimeter, hands that knew pressure, minds that remembered shape. But all of this happened after the stone was in place. The real challenge came before: movement. How do you move a 10-ton block up a mountain? The Inca had no wheels, but they had a solution: sledges and rollers. They built wooden sledges, simple platforms made of strong logs. They placed the stone on top. Then they laid logs across the ground in front of the sledge. As the sledge moved forward, the logs rolled underneath. Workers pulled from the front with ropes. Others added new logs at the front and removed them from the back. This method is still used in remote areas today. It reduces friction. It spreads the weight. It allows many people to share the load. Ropes were made from maguey fiber or llama wool. They were thick. They were braided. They could hold great force. Teams of workers, perhaps 100 or more, pulled together. They moved slowly, one step at a time. But pulling is not enough on a steep slope. Gravity fights back. So the Inca may have used ramps. They built earthen ramps,
long slopes of dirt and stone leading up to the construction site. They covered them with logs or clay to make a smooth surface. The sledge was dragged up the ramp. Once the stone reached its place, the ramp was taken apart. The earth was removed. Only the building remained. Evidence of such ramps has been found at other Inca sites. At Sacsayhuaman, near Cusco, the slopes show signs of ancient pathways that could have been ramps. At Machu Picchu, the terrain suggests similar routes were used, though the jungle has covered them. Levers were another tool. Long wooden poles were placed under the edge of the stone. A fulcrum, a small rock or log, was placed beneath. Workers pushed down on the other end. The stone lifted slightly, a small shift. Then they placed a wedge or a stone under it. They repeated the process. Each time, the block moved a little forward. It was slow, but it worked. This method is still used by masons today. It multiplies force. A small push can lift a great weight. Water may have helped too. In the rainy season, the ground turned to mud. Some researchers believe the Inca used this to their advantage. They may have wet the path before moving a stone. A slick surface reduces friction. A stone on a wooden sledge can slide more easily over mud or wet clay. There are accounts from Spanish observers in the 1500s. They saw Inca workers move large stones using water to lubricate the path. They described how the ground was soaked before a pull. This was not magic, it was smart use of nature. But all of this, dragging, rolling, levering, ramping, required more than tools. It required people. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, not at once, but over time, in shifts, in teams. And it required organization. Who told the workers where to stand? Who decided when to pull? Who made sure the ropes did not break? Who kept the rhythm? There were overseers, men who knew the work. They gave signals, they watched the stone, they corrected the path. They may have used sound, a drum beat, a shout, a song. Rhythm helps coordination. It keeps everyone pulling at the same time. And they had to plan the route. The path from the quarry to the building site was not straight. It wound around ridges. It crossed uneven ground. Every turn had to be calculated, every slope assessed. A stone that slips can crush a man. It can destroy weeks of work. So the route was tested. Small stones were moved first. The method was refined. And the work was seasonal. Most movement likely happened in the dry season, from May to September. The ground was firm. The sky was clear. The workers could see, they could walk without slipping. In the rainy season, the focus may have shifted to shaping, fitting, and building lower walls. This was not a sudden effort. It was a steady rhythm of labor over years. And the Inca had one great advantage: manpower. Through the mita system, they could call on workers from nearby villages. Hundreds could be assembled, fed, directed, rotated. They were not slaves. They were not forced against their will. They came as part of their duty to the state. In return, they received food, cloth, and protection. The state stored maize, potatoes, and dried meat in storehouses. It distributed cloth by rank. It organized the work like a machine, without gears, but with people. And the workers believed in what they were doing. This was not just a building. It was a royal estate. It belonged to the Sapa Inca. It honored the sun. It stood in sacred space. To build it was to serve the gods, to serve the empire, to serve the order of the world. That belief gave strength. It made the impossible feel possible. So the stones moved, not by miracle, not by lost technology, but by steady hands, by shared effort, by knowledge passed down through generations. They moved because people pulled, because people planned, because people persisted. And in the end, the mountain held them. The walls stood. The city rose. Not in silence, but in the sound of stone on wood, of rope under strain, of breath in thin air, of many voices working as one. That is how they moved the stones. Who built Machu Picchu? We do not know their names, but we know how they worked. The Incas used a system called mita. It was a form of labor tax. Every household had to give a certain number of days each year to work for the state. This could mean farming state land, building roads, or working on construction projects. People were not slaves, they were not owned, but they had to serve. In return, the state provided food, clothing, and protection. In times of famine, the state opened storehouses. In times of war, the state defended them. For a project like Machu Picchu, labor would have come from nearby villages. Workers may have rotated in shifts. Some came for a few weeks, others stayed longer. Skilled stonemasons were likely full-time workers. They had special knowledge. They passed it down through families. They knew how to shape stone. They knew how to fit it perfectly. Women also worked. They did not move the largest stones, but they carried smaller rocks. They mixed mortar. They wove ropes. They cooked food. They made cloth for the workers. Children may have helped too. They carried water. They ran messages. They gathered firewood. The work was hard. The altitude made breathing difficult. The sun was strong. The rain was cold. Injuries were common. But the work had meaning. It was for the Sapa Inca, the ruler. It was for the gods. It was for the empire. And the state organized everything. Supplies were brought from far away. Food, tools, rope, wood. The Incas had a vast network of storehouses. They stored maize, potatoes, dried meat, and quinoa. They could feed thousands of workers. Cloth was distributed. Workers received uniforms. The quality of cloth showed their rank. Overseers directed the work. They were called curacas. They were local leaders. They reported to higher officials. They kept order. They tracked progress. There was no writing, but there were quipus, knotted strings used to record numbers. A quipu could track how many workers came, how much food was used, how many stones were placed. Everything was counted. Everything was managed. This was not a chaotic effort. It was a state project. It was planned. It was controlled. Machu Picchu is not a random collection of buildings. It is carefully planned. The site covers about 53 hectares. It is divided into two main zones, agricultural and urban. The agricultural zone has more than 700 terraces. They were built to grow food, but they also prevented erosion. The slopes are steep. Rain could wash soil away. The terraces hold the earth in place. Each terrace has layers. At the bottom, large stones drain water. Above, gravel and sand. On top, fertile soil. This system keeps roots dry and prevents flooding. The urban zone has more than 150 buildings. They are made of stone. The walls are trapezoidal, wider at the base, narrower at the top. Doors and windows are also trapezoidal. This shape is strong. It resists earthquakes. The buildings are grouped into blocks. Some are residential, some are ceremonial, some are storage. The Temple of the Sun is round. It is built on a curved rock. It has windows that align with the sun during solstices. Inside, there is a stone altar. It may have been used for offerings. The Intihuatana stone stands on a platform. Its name means hitching post of the sun. It may have been used as an astronomical marker. On certain days, the sun casts no shadow. The Temple of the Three Windows has 3 large openings. They face east. They may represent the 3 levels of the Inca world: the sky, the earth, and the underworld. The main temple has 3 walls. They are perfectly fitted. No mortar. The stones are finely polished. Water was important. The Inca built a canal to bring spring water into the city. It flows through 16 fountains. Each fountain served a different part of the city. The water was pure. It was used for drinking, ritual, and cleaning. The entire city is aligned with the landscape. The buildings follow the contours of the ridge. They do not fight the mountain, they work with it. This was not built in a year. It took decades. It may have started in the 1440s. Work continued into the 1460s. It was not fully completed when Pachacuti died. The most striking thing about Machu Picchu is the fit of the stones. They are not just placed, they are shaped to lock together. Some stones have knobs, others have grooves. They interlock like puzzle pieces. How did they do this without modern tools? The answer is in the process. First, a rough block was cut from the quarry. It was dragged or rolled to the building site.
Then, masons began to shape it. They used hammer stones to chip away at the surface. They did not try to make it perfect at first. Next, the stone was placed in its position. It was set roughly in place. Then the masons worked on the edges. They chipped and tested. They placed the stone, saw where it did not fit, and removed small bits of rock. This was repeated over and over. It could take days or weeks for a single stone. They used a method called ashlar masonry. Each stone is shaped to fit its neighbors exactly. The result is strong. It can survive earthquakes. The Inca did not use measuring tapes or levels, but they had ways to check alignment. They may have used plumb lines, weights on strings, to check verticals. They may have used water levels, tubes filled with water, to check horizontals. They also had experience. They had built many structures. They knew what worked. The precision was not for show. It was practical. It made the buildings last. The Inca did not separate work from belief. Building was a sacred act. Stones were not just rock. They had spirit. Mountains were gods. The sun watched over them. Workers made offerings before starting. They poured chicha, corn beer, on the ground. They burned coca leaves. They asked permission from the earth. The placement of buildings followed religious ideas. The city faced the rising sun. The temples honored Inti. The Intihuatana stone may have been used to tie the sun during the solstice to keep it from moving. The dead were honored too. Machu Picchu has burial sites. Some bodies were wrapped in cloth, others were placed in niches in the rock. The Inca believed in an afterlife. They believed the ancestors watched over the living. So the city was not just for the living, it was for the dead. It was a bridge between worlds. This belief gave meaning to the labor. It was not just work, it was devotion. Pachacuti died around 1471. His son, Tupac Inka Yupanqui, became ruler. He expanded the empire further. He may have continued work at Machu Picchu. Then came Manco Cápac. He ruled from 1493 to 1527. He was the last great Inca before the Spanish arrived. During his reign, Machu Picchu was still in use, but the empire was changing. It was growing too fast. Rebellions broke out. The strain was great. Then, in the early 1500s, a new threat came from the north. Strange men with beards. They rode animals with hooves. They carried weapons that thundered. The Spanish had arrived. Francisco Pizarro landed in 1532. He captured the Inca ruler Atahualpa. He took him to Cajamarca. He demanded a room filled with gold for his release. The Inca delivered, but Pizarro killed him anyway. The empire collapsed.
Machu Picchu was not a military target. It was not on a main road. It was forgotten by the outside world. The people who lived there may have left. Some may have fled to the jungle. Others may have been taken by the Spanish. The site was overtaken by forest. Vines covered the walls. Trees grew on the terraces. For over 300 years, it was hidden. In 1911, an American historian named Hiram Bingham climbed the ridge. He was searching for Vilcabamba, the last refuge of the Inca. Local farmers led him to the site. He saw stone walls rising from the jungle. He called it the lost city of the Incas. He returned with a team. They cleared the vegetation. They mapped the buildings. They took photographs. Bingham believed it was Vilcabamba. Later research showed it was not, but his work brought attention to the site. He wrote articles. He gave lectures. Machu Picchu became famous. But Bingham did not discover it. The local people knew it was there. They called it Machu Picchu. They farmed nearby. They used the stones for their own buildings. Bingham removed artifacts. He took them to Yale University. This caused controversy. Peru wanted them back. Decades later, most were returned. Today, Machu Picchu is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is one of the most visited places in South America. But the question remains, how did they move those stones? The answer is not in lost technologies. It is not in aliens or ancient secrets. The answer is in people. The Inca had no wheels, but they had thousands of hands. They had no iron, but they had skill. They had no written plans, but they had memory. They organized labor. They used simple tools. They worked with the land. They moved the stones by dragging, rolling, lifting, and pulling. They shaped them by pounding, chipping, and testing. They built by planning, leading, and believing. It was not magic. It was human effort. And it was possible because the Inca state could command resources. It could feed workers. It could direct labor. It could sustain a project for decades. Machu Picchu stands as a testament to what people can do when they work together under a shared purpose. Not all the stones at Machu Picchu are the same. Some come from the local quarry. Others come from the river. The types of rock vary. The terraces were not all used for farming. Some were for drainage. Some were for structure. The city had no market. There was no trade. Everything was provided by the state. The population was small. At its peak, no more than 750 people lived there. Most were servants, priests, and administrators. The Inca did not use the wheel for transport, but they made wheeled toys. They knew the idea, but they did not apply it to construction. Ropes were made from maguey or llama wool. They were strong. They could hold great weight. Workers did not use metal tools, but they used bronze for some tasks. Bronze is softer than iron. It was not used for cutting stone. The site was not found by accident in 1911. Maps from the 1800s show a place called Picchu. German engineers may have seen it earlier. The name Machu Picchu means Old Peak. Huayna Picchu means Young Peak. The city was built during a time of expansion. It was a symbol of Inca power, but it was abandoned within a century.